If you are a lover of 3D platforming, you may want to start thinking about getting an Xbox. But if you are a part of the party that loathes Xbox and scoffs at the idea of it being in your home in the first place, well, there might be some good news for you, because you might not even have to buy an Xbox at all. But before we get to that, let's address the history and how Xbox has kind of come to this point. Somehow, out of nowhere, Xbox is not only now a contender for 3D platforming enthusiasts, but could become the home for many of them as well, even though it started off as far away as it could possibly be. Let's take a second here and rewind just a little bit. Just give me a moment of your time and attention. When you go back to the beginning of gaming, especially when you look at the start of home consoles, platforming has always been an incredibly popular genre. This, of course, was popularized by the most legendary video game mascot of all time, Super Mario. However, when 3D was introduced in gaming, it took the platforming genre to a whole nother level. While Nintendo was still cooking up the game that would eventually become the core DNA of all 3D platformers today, which of course was Super Mario 64, they were not the first to actually do it. The first true 3D mascot platformer was Jumping Flash, which actually debuted on Sony's first console, the PlayStation 1. Sony would then quickly become Nintendo's biggest competitor. Now, before I continue and the comment section, attacks me, yes, people argue that Alpha Waves was actually the first platforming game in 3D. But people debate whether or not this is actually a 3D platformer or a basic platforming game that's just in 3D. They both have won the Guinness World Records for these specific categories, so you may now debate in the comment section below what you think. While Super Mario 64 came out to critical acclaim and is still considered the core DNA of all 3D platformers today, Nintendo was not as far ahead of their time like they were with the original Super Mario. Sony kept the pace with Nintendo fairly well, as they published some legendary titles like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, and even Ape Escape, just to name a few. As we enter the next era of gaming, Sony slingshotted themselves into the limelight with the PlayStation 2, where they were passing the competition in strides. During this era, while Crash Bandicoot was present and Spyro was there, Sony also introduced more legendary platforming titles like Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Sly Cooper. While Nintendo had legendary IP, of course, because it's Nintendo, Sony was right behind them with their own portfolio. However, during this war, a whole brand new company stepped into the home console game, Microsoft, who would then create the very first Xbox console, of course aptly named the Xbox. Xbox at the time was a new shiny thing that people were interested in. With the backing of a titan like Microsoft, people wondered if Xbox would quickly overtake both Nintendo and PlayStation. Like every console brand before it, Xbox tried to create a mascot platformer to try and enter the same market that Nintendo, PlayStation, and even Sega had dominated. Nintendo had Mario, Sega had Sonic, PlayStation had Crash Bandicoot. So what was Xbox going to answer with? Blinks the cat! Yeah! Blinks! Woohoo! Suffice to say, Blinks was met with mixed reviews and was pretty much left in the dust after its sequel came out. But Xbox needed something to draw its players in and represent their brand. Because without that one key thing, that one key element, it really didn't have that big of a draw. Not really that big of a reason to buy an Xbox in the first place. But Xbox did in fact have a key element. Something that neither PlayStation nor Nintendo had. And that was Halo. Halo was legitimately the only reason why most people bought the first Xbox in the first place. At the time, especially in the first-person shooter genre, there was nothing like it. It was a titan of a brand right out of the gate, and Microsoft knew Halo had that it factor. But there was one problem, legitimately one problem. Halo was a rated M game. Now I know it's a rated M game. Oh no, who would have thought that's a bad thing? That's going to cause so many less sales. But back then, this was a legitimate issue. The ESRB was much tighter, people were a lot more knowledgeable of the fact of the rating, and because everything was basically bought physical, you had to be of age to be able to actually purchase these games. So yeah, it actually was a less marketable market. It's not like games today because, you know, little Timmy today can go and get some currency from mom and dad and be able to play Red Dead Redemption 2 because that's great for the learning mind. Anyway, Xbox decided to lean right into the maturity and began to market Xbox as a more edgy console, catering to a more mature audience. While this was a fantastic idea, this will eventually cause them to shoot themselves in the foot multiple times. In 2002, one of the biggest shocks had ever happened still to this day in gaming history. Xbox acquired a studio who was known as a Nintendo-based developer, Rare. Rare was responsible for some of the most legendary games on the Nintendo family of consoles. Battletoads, Donkey Kong Country, Killer Instinct, 007 GoldenEye, Banjo Kazooie. All of these titles were a part of the golden age of Nintendo, and they were just swept up by Microsoft. How this ever happened is still mind-blowing to me. I mean, I know Rare wasn't technically owned by Nintendo, they were a third party, but still to this day, it blows my mind that this had ever happened. Now, fast forward to 2005, and Xbox was also the first to enter the next generation of consoles before both the PlayStation 3 and the Wii with the Xbox 360. Now, the 360 had a lot of buzz due to, well, it being the first generation next console. It boasted beautiful graphics, and all of its launch titles were catered to teens and adults, as the only E-rated games were basically sports titles. It's like Xbox slammed down a sign that said "No Kids Allowed" right in front of it, which of course makes it 10 times cooler to the bunch of 12-year-old kids. But this is where a division started to happen in the gaming community, partway through the 360 generation. The problem was that people still thoroughly enjoyed games that were lighthearted and fun, like Mario, Crash Bandicoot, Sonic, Spyro, and many others. So for those people who really gravitated and enjoyed those types of games, Xbox wasn't really catering to them. Xbox kind of came off like the jock with sunglasses who would laugh at the kids playing with toys and calling them big babies. Yeah, we are really leaning into the 90s movie tropes today. But Xbox came up with a clever idea at one point. What if they made a game that would push fans of these more lighthearted games into buying an Xbox by taking an established IP and then let's make it exclusive to the Xbox 360? Remember how I said that this would lead to Xbox eventually shooting themselves in the foot? Yeah, load the gun now. Xbox decided to task Rare with making a brand new Banjo Kazooie title, which of course is a brilliant idea. Make a brand new high fidelity Banjo Kazooie game, which was a legendary title over on the Nintendo brand of consoles, make it exclusive to Xbox, and try to convince these more lighthearted family friendly gamers to buy an Xbox and join the Xbox ecosystem.
Sounds like a great idea, with the best of intentions. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, there was a caveat to this idea. See, Xbox wanted to simply bank on the name of Banjo Kazooie and the developer behind it, Rare, hoping that it would convince people to hop over and try the game out. But Xbox didn't really think the whole 3D platformer collectathon thing would work with their more mature audience. So Xbox's plan was to make a game that Xbox gamers would love, but also to try and convince Nintendo gamers to join in on, simply because it was a cherished IP that was once on their home console. 2 Kazooies, 1 good. So what was the result of this amazing idea? Drumroll please. Banjo Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts. A new take on the Banjo series that has nothing to do with the first 2 games. While there was some aspect, of course, of platforming and collecting, the game's focus was on building custom cars and driving around in a big overworld, completing quests and challenges. If you were to look at the game in of itself and just remove the Banjo Kazooie element from it, don't think of it as a Banjo Kazooie game, just remove it. The idea wasn't half bad, but this attempt at appeasing both audiences left neither audience even remotely happy. Xbox players didn't really know Banjo Kazooie, so they had little interest to begin with, and classic Nintendo fans saw the gameplay was nothing like the original Banjo games, which not only did not sell them on the idea to get an Xbox, but perhaps even pushed them further away from the brand. Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is still used as a precedent argument today as to how Xbox handles classic platforming titles. And you want to know where I can source that from? My comments section in every Banjo video. So now it's 2013, and it's now time for Xbox to reveal the next console to follow up their massively successful Xbox 360, the Xbox One. And it was a disaster. And I'm not saying this as an exaggerated hee ha ha joke. No. It was objectively a disaster. Xbox shifted from focusing on their more mature audience they were pandering to at a breakneck speed to turn their gaming console into a family tool that could be used by the entire family. They did this by including TV hookups to the console. And this was seemingly their entire focus for the bloody conference.
Trending gives me a glance at what everyone in the Xbox Live community is watching. I like how current it is. It's up to the minute. From here, I can instantly jump into the most popular shows.
Brother, this guy stinks!
Additionally, Xbox was planning on releasing the console with a system that would restrict the sales of pre-owned titles and requiring the Xbox to authenticate every 24 hours, so requiring a constant internet connection. Additionally, if you wanted to share a game with a friend, they created a convoluted guide to explain how to share your games with friends. This, of course, led to parodies like Sony making the shortest and one of the funniest ads ever.
Thanks.
All of these choices were such a massive mistake and caused such a blowback, it literally forced Xbox to roll back on these changes and caused the CEO at the time, Don Mattrick, to leave the company. But the damage was already initially done. So now Xbox at this point was not only alienating their core fan base, but the entire gaming community, pushing literally everyone further away from this brand, including the family-friendly oriented gamers. After Don Mattrick was essentially politely but firmly asked to leave because of how bad the 2013 E3 conference went, eventually Xbox placed Phil Spencer as CEO of Xbox in 2014. Phil had a completely different vision for Xbox, one that he feels would truly be for every gamer, and that was Game Pass. Now, I don't need to explain Game Pass to y'all, as I assume that even if you don't have an Xbox, you already know what it is. But I will boil it down real quickly to basic simplicity. You pay a monthly fee and you get access to hundreds of games, from indie to AAA. And every game that is owned by Xbox, so every first-party game, releases on Game Pass day one. And here's where we get back to the start of the video. See, over the course of many years, there have been many acquisitions by many companies. If, for example, Company A buys Company Company A now owns all the game IPs that Company B owned. But if Company C buys Company A, now Company C owns the rights to all the game rights that Company A had, which includes Company B's. Over the course of a few decades, with hundreds of acquisitions and mergers in the gaming industry alone, companies started to gain a giant portfolio of old IP without even knowing the entirety of what was in it. However, in 2017, with the help of PlayStation, Activision released a title that I believe started the whole classics remastered trend: Crash Bandicoot, the Insane Trilogy. After Insane, the remake and remaster market went absolutely insane. Pun 100% intended. Spyro also got the same treatment a year later, followed by Shadow of the Colossus, Medieval, Zelda, Link's Awakening, Crash Team Racing, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, Demon's Souls, Klonoa, the list goes on and on. The point is, companies realized very quickly that they should take a look at their giant catalog of games to see if there were some classics that would be polished up and re-released for both the original and a new audience. So for the sake of fun, why don't we take a look at Xbox's catalog of games that they own and see if any of them would be of interest to a 3D platforming fan. First off, of course, we know that Xbox owns Rare, which means they have access to Banjo Kazooie. but also the bad-mouthing, gunslinging squirrel, Conker. But because of the recent acquisition of Activision Blizzard, Xbox now also owns PlayStation Legends, Crash Bandicoot, and Spyro the Dragon. But something that a lot of people forget is that Skylanders is also kind of a platforming title that is separate from Spyro, but also another IP that Activision owned that many didn't know was a platformer called Pitfall. Additionally, Xbox purchased Double Fine, who made the cult classic platformer in 2005, Psychonauts, which recently saw a sequel come out as recently as 2021. Xbox was also the publisher of Playful Studios' cute little fox platformer, Super Lucky's Tale. Additionally, a game that I completely forgot about, Voodoo Vince, was an IP that is owned by Xbox. Lastly, and certainly the least, Blinks the Time Sweeper is there for someone to try and do something with. But these are titles that are owned and or published by Xbox alone, which means they can actually start adding many of these games to their Game Pass library. And they've already started. Banjo Kazooie, Tooie, Psychonauts, and Super Lucky's Tale were already on Game Pass. But recently, Crash Bandicoot The Insane Trilogy was just added and already shot to the top of the list, hitting second place overall merely days after it was added. The only game that was bigger than Crash at the time of it being released on Game Pass was Minecraft. And yes, it even beat Call of Duty. Shortly after, Spyro Reignited and even Crash Team Racing were added to the catalog of games. But Xbox isn't even limited to Crash and Spyro's most recent remasters. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time could easily make its way to Game Pass, along with older games from both franchises, like Crash the Titans or even the Legend of Spyro trilogy. So, a debate and argument can be made to suggest that Xbox could very quickly become the home of 3D platforming outside of Nintendo, which is a very strange and weird thought. To add on to this, Astrobot had recently won 4 Game Awards. One of them was in the category that Nintendo has won for many years and is basically designed with them in mind, Best Family Game. But not only that, the Game of the Year went to Astrobot. Think about that for a second. A 3D Mascot platformer winning Game of the Year. Astrobot set a precedent that there is still a lot of value in 3D platformers and that it can be done outside of the halls of Nintendo. But you might still be standing there, torch high up in the air, still ready to set ablaze to the sheer concept that Xbox may be responsible for a large portion of the market's future 3D platforming. Well, I would not be so nervous. Xbox has very clearly shown that they not only are okay with sharing their IPs outside of their own games, like Banjo Kazooie coming to Smash Bros., but are okay with titles going multi-platform. Hi-Fi Rush, for example, went to PlayStation 5, and Ori and the Blind Forest and its sequel came to the Nintendo Switch. Xbox also has to be careful because of the FTC and the fighting over the Activision buyout. So in terms of games under the Activision banner, like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, I think we will see them come to rival consoles day one, again, like on PlayStation. To push this even further, Xbox has gone on record to state that they want to bring Game Pass to both Nintendo Switch and PlayStation, literally knocking down all walls holding the platforms back. So in the future, you might be able to play this library of 3D platforming titles without even owning an Xbox in the first place. Heck, there's even an ad campaign going on at the moment showing all the different pieces of tech being an Xbox because it can play Xbox's library of titles. But before Xbox can actually become this wonderland for gamers who enjoy 3D platformers, there has to be a new bridge of trust made. Between being originally marketed to a more mature audience, Banjo Kazooie nuts and bolts, the Activision acquisition fiasco, and much more in between all of that, there is plenty of mistrust between these platformer-focused gamers and its surrounding fans. So Xbox is to try to find a way to repair that and assure that these classic IPs will be taken care of on their platform in order to convince these people to join the Xbox ecosystem. Now, some of you still might be a bit bitter, especially since games like Banjo Kazooie have still yet to be announced as to being in development. So how does that exactly work? Why is it so weird for Banjo to not get a new game? Well, I answer that question and more in this video right here. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.